Imagine being surrounded by the untamed wild, where every rustle in the bush could be a hidden predator. For years, I've guided safaris through Africa's most dangerous landscapes, showing tourists breathtaking beauty. But what you don't see are the moments my heart races, the real fears I face when the cameras are off. This isn't your typical safari story. Part 1. Beyond the Postcards. The Unseen Wild. When people think of wild Africa, the first images that come to mind are the glossy postcards, a fiery sunset casting golden light over a herd of elephants, a majestic lion perched on a mound, or zebras grazing peacefully across the endless savanna. It's the perfect tourism picture, the one that floods Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube feeds. But behind the lens lies a very different reality, one that only a seasoned safari guide truly understands. As someone who has spent years leading safaris deep into the African wilderness, I know all too well that what tourists see is only the sunlit surface. In truth, every journey into the bush feels like gambling with nature. No one can predict what lies beyond the next thicket. Tourists see me smiling, cracking jokes, and sharing stories, but inside, my heart is often pounding with tension. To give you an idea, while a group of visitors is excitedly photographing a herd of giraffes, I might be tuned in to the faint rustle of leaves carried by the wind. To them, it's nothing, but to me, someone who has stared into the eyes of a stalking lion, that sound could be the first warning of a predator nearby. Every movement, every shift in the air can carry a message of danger. Many times, I've had to fake calmness to reassure my guests, even while my mind is racing through emergency scenarios. What if that rhino suddenly charges at our vehicle? What if a mother elephant feels threatened and storms toward us? What escape routes are available, and which direction is safest? These what-ifs never leave my head. It's a constant state of high alert that never really switches off. What few outsiders understand is the psychological weight of this job. Tourists want just enough thrill to feel adventurous while still being safe. But for me, every trip is a real test of survival. I'm not only responsible for my own life, but also for every single person sitting behind me, trusting me with theirs. One wrong move, driving too close to a lion's den, stopping the vehicle with the wind in the wrong direction, could mean disaster. And when night falls and the tourists return to their cozy tents, they go to sleep with magical memories of the day. Meanwhile, I'm left replaying the close calls in my head, haunted by the near disasters that almost unfolded. Behind every postcard-perfect safari lies an unseen layer of silent fear, a reality only those who live in the bush can ever truly know. Part 2. The Whispers of Danger. When instinct kicks in, there's a moment every safari guide learns to recognize, a moment when the air grows heavier, when the bush falls unnaturally silent, and when instinct whispers that something is wrong. It's not a sound you can always hear, nor a movement you can always see. It's a feeling, deep in the gut, sharpened by years of experience and countless close calls. For me, these whispers of danger are both a curse and a lifeline. I remember one afternoon guiding a family of tourists along a dusty track in Kruger National Park. The mood was light, the guests laughing as they snapped photos of impalas grazing nearby. Then it happened. The bush grew eerily still. No bird calls, no rustle of insects, just a suffocating silence. My hands tightened on the steering wheel. I knew that silence meant only one thing. A predator was close. Moments later, Out of the corner of my eye, I spotted the amber eyes of a lioness locked on us from the tall grass. In that split second, 100 scenarios raced through my mind. If she charges, do I accelerate forward or reverse back? Do I tell the guests to stay calm, or do I bark an urgent order? Instinct told me to keep my voice steady, my movements measured. "Stay seated. Keep your arms inside," I said, as casually as if I were commenting on the weather. Inside, though, my pulse thundered in my ears. One wrong move could trigger the lioness's attack reflex. Luckily, after a long, tense stare, she melted back into the grass. My guests cheered, thrilled by the close encounter. None of them realized how narrowly we had avoided disaster. It isn't just lions. I've had elephants suddenly block the road, ears flaring and trunks raised in warning. Once, a massive bull elephant stamped so close to the vehicle that the ground shook beneath us. My tourists gasped in awe, but I was silently calculating, if he decides to flip this vehicle, we won't survive. In those moments, fear transforms into sharp clarity. Every decision must be exact, every movement deliberate. And then there are the rhinos, gentle-looking until provoked. One evening, as dusk painted the sky crimson, a rhino emerged onto the road ahead. At first, he was calm, snorting softly, watching us. But then, a guest made the mistake of standing to get a better photo. The rhino's posture shifted instantly, head down, muscles coiled. I knew we had seconds. I pressed the accelerator, maneuvering us slowly out of his path, whispering firmly for everyone to sit still. Only when we were safely out of range did I let out the breath I hadn't realized I was holding. What outsiders don't see is that, for a guide, these what-if scenarios never stop. Even when nothing happens, your mind is rehearsing every possible outcome. If that buffalo charges, where's the nearest escape route? If the leopard leaps from that tree, how do I shield the guests? Instinct is what keeps us alive. Not textbooks, not training manuals, but that primal voice honed by countless brushes with danger. Tourists often leave thinking they've experienced a thrilling adventure. And yes, they have. But they've only glimpsed the surface. What they don't know is that behind every amazing sighting, their guide's instinct was running calculations in the background, dancing on the razor's edge between awe and catastrophe. The whispers of danger never leave me. They haunt the quiet moments, sharpen the noisy ones, and keep me alive in a land where one mistake means the end. Part 3. Survival's Edge. Humans versus Nature's Fury. Predators are not the only threats lurking in Africa's wilderness. Sometimes it is not the lion's roar or the rhino's charge that tests a safari guide. It is the raw, unforgiving power of nature itself. Out here, the wild does not follow human schedules or tourist expectations. The land answers only to itself, and when it strikes, survival depends not on strength, but on quick thinking and sheer resilience. I will never forget the day the sky turned black without warning. One moment, we were driving beneath the warm African sun. The next, a wall of storm clouds rose on the horizon, swallowing the light. Within minutes, the heavens opened. Rain came down in sheets so heavy the windshield was useless. The dusty track transformed into a river of mud, and the vehicle skidded dangerously with every turn of the wheel. For my guests, it was an exciting storm. For me, it was a nightmare. The nearest lodge was miles away, and the road had become a trap. Every choice carried risk. Push forward and risk getting stuck in the mud, or stop and risk being stranded in predator territory. I tightened my grip, whispered a prayer, and drove on, fighting the current of floodwater that threatened to sweep us off the track. Hours later, When we finally rolled into camp, drenched but alive, my guests clapped and laughed. They had no idea how close we had come to being swallowed by the bush. But it isn't always storms. Sometimes it's fire. Bushfires in Africa ignite with terrifying speed, often from a single spark or a lightning strike. I once led a tour in Botswana when we spotted smoke rising in the distance. Within half an hour, the fire was racing toward us, devouring dry grass and crackling with heat. The tourists wanted to stop and film it, mesmerized by the orange wall of flame. I knew better. Fire in the bush doesn't wait. It leaps, it hunts, it consumes. I slammed the vehicle into gear, scanning for the narrowest escape route. My instincts screamed, "Move! Now!" Then there are the quiet killers, heat and isolation. In the depths of the dry season, water is scarce, and shade is a blessing. Vehicles break down, radios fail, and sometimes help is hours, even days, away. I've had tourists faint from dehydration, their faces pale under the relentless sun. In those moments, the wilderness feels less like paradise and more like a vast, merciless desert. A safari guide learns quickly. The bush doesn't care if you are experienced or naive, rich or poor. Out here, everyone is vulnerable. These experiences taught me something vital. In Africa's wilderness, survival belongs to those who adapt fastest. You cannot fight nature. You cannot control it. The only way to live is to respect its fury, anticipate its unpredictability, and stay one step ahead. Tourists come for the thrill of seeing lions, elephants, and leopards, but what they rarely realize is that the true danger often doesn't have claws or teeth. It is the storm that blinds, the fire that chokes, the silence of a broken radio in the middle of nowhere. As a guide, my greatest battles are not always against predators, but against the untamed power of the earth itself. When I look back, it's not the photographs or the laughter I remember most. It's the nights spent soaked, shivering beside a stranded vehicle, or the moment I drove through fire with my heart pounding louder than the roaring flames. Those are the moments when the wilderness reminds you, humans are fragile, and survival is never guaranteed. Part 4. The Unspoken Bond. Trusting Your Animal Senses. Years of guiding through Africa. Wilderness have taught me one truth. Survival is not just about strength or speed. It is about awareness. When you spend enough time in the bush, something changes inside you. Your senses sharpen. You begin to notice things others never would. A flicker in the grass, the shift of the wind, the sudden silence of birds. Each becomes a signal, a message from the wild. Out here, instincts are not optional. They are the difference between life and death. At first, when I was new to guiding, I relied heavily on training manuals, radio communications, and the rules handed down by senior rangers. But soon I learned that the bush doesn't play by rules. No textbook could have prepared me for the day a leopard dropped silently from a tree just meters from my vehicle, or the time a herd of elephants turned aggressive after a calf stumbled. In those moments, instinct was my only ally. Over time, I began to feel the bush in ways I can't fully explain. My ears became tuned to frequencies of alarm calls, how a baboon's bark changes when it spots a leopard versus a lion. My eyes learned to distinguish between the casual grazing of zebras and the rigid stillness that means a predator is near. Even my skin seemed to sense danger, the way the air tightens before something happens. It's not just about animals either. The bond extends to the vehicle itself. After years behind the wheel, I know every creak and vibration of the safari truck. It's more than a machine. It's a partner. When danger approaches, I feel its readiness beneath my hands. The vehicle becomes an extension of myself, a silent agreement. If I guide it wisely, It will carry us out of danger. One moment I'll never forget happened late one night on a moonlit drive. We had stopped to watch a herd of buffalo when I felt something wrong, though I couldn't yet see or hear it. My pulse quickened. I urged the guests to stay still, my eyes scanning the shadows, and then, like a ghost, a lion emerged from the darkness, no more than a few feet away. My instincts had screamed before my eyes confirmed it. The guests gasped in awe, thinking it was magic. For me, it was simply survival, listening to senses that years of bush life had sharpened into something close to telepathy. This unspoken bond with the wild comes with a profound respect. No matter how skilled you are, the animals always hold the power. A guide who underestimates that truth won't last long. I've seen newcomers who thought they could outwit nature, treating predators as predictable attractions. They didn't stay in the profession for long. The bush humbles you, strips away arrogance, and teaches you reverence. Sometimes tourists ask me if I ever feel afraid. The answer is yes, always. But fear is not weakness. It is awareness. It sharpens my senses and keeps me alert. Fear, balanced with respect, is what allows me to walk the fine line between guiding an unforgettable safari and leading my group into catastrophe. In time, you learn to trust those animal-like instincts as much as your own eyes. You stop questioning the feeling that tells you to wait 5 more seconds before turning a corner, or to back up when everything looks fine. More often than not, that feeling saves lives. The bush teaches you to listen, not just with your ears, but with your entire being. And once you've experienced that connection, you realize it's not just survival. It's a conversation, a silent dialogue between human, machine, and wilderness. One built on trust, respect, and the unspoken bond that keeps us alive. Part 5. The Price of Paradise. A guide's daily reality. People often imagine that being a safari guide is the dream job. After all, I get to witness Africa's most breathtaking landscapes, see lions hunt under the rising sun, and watch elephants bathe in golden rivers. Friends tell me I'm lucky to live in paradise. And yes, there is truth in that. But what few realize is that paradise comes with a price paid daily in stress, sacrifice, and silent burdens that most never see. The reality of life as a safari guide is not just sunsets and adventure. It is early mornings, long hours, and nights spent restless, listening to the bush outside the thin canvas of a tent. While tourists return home with memories and photographs, guides remain behind, carrying the weight of responsibility day after day. The constant vigilance, the near misses, the endless calculations, it leaves a mark, both on the mind and the body. I've known guides who developed insomnia, their minds replaying the split-second choices that saved lives, or nearly cost them. I've seen others walk away from the profession altogether, worn down by the anxiety of always being one mistake away from disaster. And yet, many of us stay. Why? Because despite the fear, despite the stress, the wilderness offers something no city or office job ever could: a raw, unfiltered connection to life at its most real. For me, the hardest part is not the danger. It's the cumulative stress of responsibility. Every day, I am accountable for strangers who put their trust in me. Their excitement is my duty. Their safety is my burden. I've smiled through my own exhaustion, hidden my fear when a situation spiraled out of control, and laughed with guests while my mind quietly prepared for the worst. They see the calm guide. They don't see the nights when my hands still tremble long after the danger has passed. And yet, for all its weight, I wouldn't trade this life. The wild gives as much as it takes. It humbles me, teaches me patience, and reminds me daily of how fragile and precious life is. To watch the sun rise over the savannah after surviving a stormy night is to feel gratitude in its purest form. To hear the distant roar of a lion while sitting safely with a group who trusts me is to know that my fear, my vigilance, has meaning. The price of paradise is high. It is measured in sleepless nights, tense muscles, and moments when death feels too close. But it is also rewarded in memories no photograph can capture, in the respect of those who share the journey, and in the privilege of being a witness to nature's unfiltered truth. Guides like me don't stay because it's easy. We stay because the wilderness gives us something worth the risk. It gives us a purpose. Every day, I carry fear with me. But fear is also my compass, my teacher, my reminder that I am alive in one of the last true wild places on Earth. When people ask why I continue despite the dangers, I smile. Because for all the risks, all the anxieties, all the nights spent on edge, the truth is simple. Paradise is not free. But for those willing to pay the price, it is worth everything.